Princeton University defines a strawman argument as a weak or sham argument set up to be easily refuted.
You're correct, venomfangx. A strawman argument is a weak or sham argument set up to be easily refuted. This is a misrepresentation of your opponent's position. The statement that God does not exist is not a strawman argument. It's simply a statement. Now, strawman arguments can be derived from the discussion of this topic, but the statement itself is simply a statement. Lack of evidence for the existence of something is evidence for its non-existence. Not proof, mind you. Evidence and proof are two different things. Now, what kind of evidence would an atheist use to disprove the existence of a God? We'd use the natural world. We'd simply use the fact that everything that's been examined by science shows no hallmarks of being created, but instead shows all the hallmarks of being produced via natural processes and natural laws. In your video, you indicate that you claim as evidence for the existence of your God everything that exists. Well, that's a statement that everything that exists is a product of your God. It's not really evidence that it is a product of your God. So what does it mean then? It doesn't really mean anything. Restatement of the God of the Gaps theory. True. We don't know everything, but we can make extrapolations from that which we do know. We've seen over time that more and more things that were once attributed to God or gods are now simply attributed to natural processes. So, where is your God going? He seems to be hiding more and more. You would think that something as all-powerful and all-knowing and all-responsible for the world would leave far more definitive fingerprints than your God seems to have. Matter of fact, his fingerprints are about as noticeable as those of leprechauns. Omnipotence. The statement that you put forth on your video is exactly that. It's a statement. It's something meant to illustrate that the concept of omnipotence is an internally conflicted and internally logically inconsistent idea. You actually kind of stated this in your video. It refutes itself. Of course it does. And that's the only thing that this kind of statement illustrates, is that omnipotence is itself contradictory. It cannot exist if the laws of logic are at all valid. And so far, they seem to be. So, a quick little note about your talking about what God cannot do. You do realize that anything an omnipotent being cannot do is a limit to its power, right? Hence, limiting the concept of omnipotence to something that is just very potent. An omnipotent being can do anything. They have the power to do whatever they wish, anything they wish. Now, they may choose not to do certain things, but it doesn't mean it's impossible for them to. An omnipotent God could lie. He may choose not to, but it's not impossible. Okay, now one more note here. Actually, in this straw man number 2, you came close to stating an actual straw man that atheists may produce. And just like the ones that you produce when it comes to evolution, it's mostly due to naivety. We may claim certain aspects of God and then refute those without knowing what you mean by it. But you're claiming a God that's omnipotent and then saying that that God is limited. This would not be a straw man in this sense. We're using your definition of God to show that your definition of God is logically inconsistent. Just wanted to make a point of that. Who created God? That's a valid question. I mean, given some of the arguments that theists have put forth, For instance, the old Aquinas argument that something always comes from something else. Obviously, you get to God, you have to ask, where did God come from? This is a question meant to make the theist think. Obviously, it doesn't work on many of you. Sadly. The Bible was written by men. As to their inspiration, of course you claim it was a God. I don't claim it was anything other than their religious and political views. The predictions of the Bible are quite vague, and many of them, and the so-called fulfilled predictions in the New Testament could easily be a product of after-the-fact writing. I'm not really all that knowledgeable on this subject, but that's just an opinion of mine. I'll let others who are more knowledgeable take that on. Now, this one about there being so many religions and therefore no religion is correct, I've never heard an atheist make such a claim. I've heard the contrary, and, well, not really contrary, but I've heard the other argument that there are so many religions out there, how can you be certain which one is correct? And of course you would claim the Bible as evidence for your religion, but others wouldn't accept it, so again you fall to that problem of which one is correct, if any of them. Though it's true that, you know, having all these religions doesn't necessarily mean that none of them are correct. One could be correct. It also doesn't imply that one has to be correct. In my view, none of them are correct. I mean, they just aren't. But what it is really meant to illustrate when we have so many religions and so many followers is that you cannot use argument from the multitude. You can't say that because so many people believe in a thing, that thing must be true. Because obviously, you know, there's a lot of people believing in other things that would conflict with that first thing. In this case, Christianity versus, say, Islam, or Christianity versus, say, Buddhism. Okay, and the number 6, so-called straw man, though really all of these claims have been straw men in and of themselves. How can anyone claim to know the truth? I've never really heard an atheist claim that. I'm sure one or two may have, but I disagree with their view. I mean, in my view, truth can be known. Truth is what we can observe and test and determine through its validity through that testing and that observation. Sadly, your God doesn't fall under this, so I wouldn't call your claims of God a truth. Though evolution is truth. We know this. We can observe it. We've seen it. We can predict and test. And all those tests are valid. They all show that evolution occurs and has occurred. But as for a God, I really don't cover that question in this. Because truth can be known, and in my view, the truth is a God doesn't exist. Number 7 was kind of funny. Everyone has their own beliefs. Well, that's true, as you said. I mean, there's no straw man there. It's simply a statement of fact. It can be used in conflict with the Christian view that, you know, basically their view is not the only one out there, even though a lot of them might a lot of them seem to implicate that, especially when they're talking to atheists. So there's no straw man there. It's not the best question. I mean, sorry, it's not the best statement, but it is what it is. Now, in your depiction of number 7, this so-called straw man, even though you don't actually commit the fallacy of a false dichotomy, you do indicate it. You know, it's not entirely true that either one person in an argument or the other person in an argument must be right. They could both be wrong, or they could both contain aspects of correctness. I mean, say you and I are arguing about the existence of your God. I'm saying gods do not exist, and you say my God does exist. And let's say Zeus is actually the real God. Well, we're both wrong. But, you know, we don't have to play that game. It's just the way it is. So be careful with false dichotomies. Saying that is either or, when it could be this, that, and the other thing, can lead to some problems. Oh,